It's a pleasure to see you all today for our final day of the 4th International Conference on the Safe Schools Declaration. If you're joining us for the first time, this conference is being hosted by the governments of Nigeria in partnership with the African Union Commission, Argentina, Norway, Spain, and the Global Coalition to Protect Education from Attack. This is the first conference on African soil and the first to be held virtually. And to ensure that we can get a truly global audience to join us, we also have a very immersive SSD platform that I'm sure anybody who attended would really have enjoyed. And on that note, we also welcome our delegates joining us from around the world. Yesterday, we listened to videos from children around the world. We listened to the Children's Parliament. We listened to a keynote address from the President of Nigeria, His Excellency, President Muhammadu Buhari, a welcome address from the Nigerian Minister of Education, Minister of State for Education, goodwill messages from around the world, and we had two great panels. The first on the experiences of the Ministries of Defense in protecting education, and the second on using the guidelines for protecting schools and universities during armed conflict. I know we were left with a lot to think about, and so we'll build on that for today's discussions. Getting right into the activities of today, we'll begin with a conversation urging non-state armed groups to protect education. Now, I will be having this conversation with Mr. Alain Délétroz, who is the Director General, Geneva Call, and who's joining us virtually from Geneva. So I will head over here and we'll have a wonderful chat about how to engage with non-state armed groups to protect education. Let's see if Mr. Délétroz is here. Good morning, Mr. Délétroz.
Good morning. Happy to be online with you.
Pleasure to speak with you and conversation.
So am I. I would have been happy to be there with you, as you know. I was ready to come, but then at the last minute, for a technical problem, I couldn't join.
So, just ask you to say that again. I'm listening to your audio. I want to make sure that we can hear you as best as we can.
Saying that, as you know, I was about to come and to be in the room with you today, but for a technical reason at the last minute I couldn't come. I'm very happy to be online.
Do this regardless. So let's get into this conversation. The guidelines are intended to be implemented by non-state armed groups, as well as state armed forces. How are non-state armed groups taking steps to implement the guidelines? And what's being done to encourage them not to use schools for military purposes?
Well, as you know, Geneva Call has an experience of now 21 years of working and engaging on non-state actors to get them to respect basic principles of international law. Geneva Call has been part of the series of expert meetings to run up to the Safe School Declaration of 2015. We've been part of the process. We are in the Global Coalition to Protect Education from Attack. And I would like to start by thanking the Nigerian government and Argentina for the Safe School Declaration. As we now have a few years after the declaration was proclaimed, already 112 countries signatories to it. I think it's a great achievement and congratulations. Now, about how to engage armed non-state actors in this, Geneva Call has basically a series of instruments. One is to bring them to have a code of conduct that includes the guidelines to protect education. The second instrument Is the audio working well?
I think we can hear you now. Please continue.
Okay, well then, if you want, we have been engaging just after the Safe School Declaration has been proclaimed. We immediately organized a meeting of 35 armed non-state actors 29 of which were signatories of Geneva Accords Deed of Commitment. And in the Deed of Commitment on Child Protection of Geneva Accord, we have actors which are signatories of the deed to provide, to ensure free access to education for all the children in the territories that these groups control. And so we organized a meeting of 35 unknown state actors, 29 of which were signatories of these deeds protecting children. Shoot on this. We are now engaging about over 90 on groups on child protection and on the guidelines and their obligations to respect children and education. Now, maybe the point I want to make in October 2021 is that what we've seen in the fields where we are active during the pandemic, the lockdown has had, the different lockdowns you had across the world, including in the zones of conflict, has had a very negative impact on education because schools were closed down and we've seen units, we've seen unknown state actors taking over schools, just saying to us, for instance, okay, these buildings were free to convince unknown state actors not to do that, to remind them of their obligation as a non-actor under international humanitarian law and remove them from these places. But this is these 2 last years with the pandemic have been a bad news for the protection of education and so on.
I would like to ask, what are the challenges has Geneva Accord faced in engaging with non-state armed groups? We've talked about COVID just now, but what other challenges have you had?
Thank you for this question. I think the very success to get them to implement, to change their code of conduct, to implement, the guidelines, we have to have access to them. Having access to unknown state actors involves almost every time security risks. The second big risk is all the legislations that have flourished all over the world recently. Africa also have come up with very tough legislations to counter terrorism, by which humanitarian actors like Geneva Accord, like other humanitarian actors, could be possibly sued for having been in touch with armed actors that are on the list of terrorist organizations of either a multilateral organization or a concrete government. So this has become a major new challenge for the work we are doing, and I use the opportunity of this conference to make an appeal to governments to ensure that in all the legislations they have on counterterrorism, they always include an article exempting humanitarian workers. Otherwise, we will end up in a world where nobody will have access to these people, to armed state actors. And that is not good for the protection of basic principles of international humanitarian law. And in the case of this conference, to ensure that the guidelines of the Safe School Declaration and guidelines are being promoted.
That makes a lot of sense. And you're right, it is a complicated situation. I'm also thinking about accountability in this situation. How does Geneva Accord address the issue of accountability in engaging with non-state armed groups?
I thank you. I think this morning you were asking me all the easiest questions possible under the sun, right? Well, accountability for armed non-state actors, in our case, I would say there are 2 different cases. Accountability for the armed non-state actors, which are signatories of Geneva Accords Deeds of Commitment, is very clear because the deed has very clear articles about this. The first one is that they are obliged to open their ransom files and the territories they control to Geneva Calls personnel for monitoring of their implementation of the deed. And there is another article in the deed that allows Geneva Call to denounce the deed publicly in case the signatories don't respect. So as I said, we have for the moment 29 armed non-state actors that are signatories. We have now 3 armed actors who are in the, if I can use this word, in the pipeline to be signing the deed before the end of this year. So for the signatories, we have very clear provisions. We can do the work of monitoring. For the other ones, the vast majority of the other armed non-state actors with which we are engaging, it is, in terms of accountability, it's much more complicated because we are basically trying to convince them to change their code of conduct, convince them concretely, and there I have a series of positive stories to tell also. For instance, to remove the headquarters from schools where they have been headquartering for a while. But there is no mechanism of demands on them for as long as they have not committed under any kind of documents. The deeds of commitments of Geneva Call are not legally binding, but in a way they are, this public commitment, the publicity of the deed, the fact that they commit publicly is a very strong instrument for us to see that they implement.
Mr. Délétroz, thank you so much. It's been such a brief conversation. I can't believe that we've already spoken so much in such a short time. I would like to ask, do you have any rounding up comments you can give us in 1 minute?
No, maybe just repeating what I said. We are now, when it comes to the protection of education and the protection of school and universities, in the unique positions after the pandemic. And I think as in the room, you have several representatives of states. I think the states have to show the good example. One of the challenges that I'm getting when I'm meeting commanders of armed non-state actors on the ground, they tell us, okay, Geneva Call is trying to bring us to do this, to have code of conducts that are aligned with the obligations of international humanitarian law. But look how official national armies behave. And so maybe to wrap up my conversation, I'd like to make a call to state representatives in the room that under the Geneva Conventions, all the 120 governments that have now signed under the Safe School Declaration must show a good example, must ensure that none of the official military units are using school that has been emptied during the lockdowns due to the pandemic, or are conducting military activities close to education centers, because the obligations of states are clearly mentioned in the Geneva Conventions that have been signed and ratified by the vast majority of states in the world. As you know, these are conventions mostly and widely ratified in the world. And, as we say sometimes in Geneva, there is no better preach than preaching by good example. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Délétroz, for a really great conversation. It has been a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.